كيف نبني كفايات المعلمين للمستقبل؟ ما دور الاعتماد على معايير المعلمين؟ وما الأدلة العملية التي تعزز كفايات المعلم؟ للتعمق فيما على المدارس التفكير به في هذا المنحى، ننتقل إلى جلستنا الثانية والتي تديرها الدكتورة رشا شرف من جامعة حلوان في مصر، وعنوان الجلسة بناء كفايات المعلمين للمستقبل.
Thank you, Dr. Nunu, for a comprehensive session. They say the future is in the eyes of our children, and we say we pave the road for our children to see the future in their eyes. Dear attendees, our next session will be in English. How do we build teacher competencies for the future? What is the role of accreditation and teacher standards? What practical evidence do we have that enhances teacher competencies? To know this and more, we welcome the next discussion panel moderated by Dr. Rasha Sharaf from Helwan University, Egypt, entitled Building Teacher Competencies for the Future. Welcome, Dr. Rasha.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let me first express my excitement and happiness and gratitude for Queen Rania Teacher Academy for organizing such forum, and with a very critical topic about building forward our schools. And of course, education would primarily depend on the quality of teachers, and hence we are now discussing our topic of our forum today. Our session is building teacher competencies for the future. And I would like to welcome the panelists, Mrs. Anood Al Kaabi and Mr. Christopher Koch and Mr. Mamdouh Fadiel and Dr. Anood Bachelor for their kind contribution to the forum today. We're trying now to we have like a number of questions in mind that we're trying to seek an answer for. First of which I would like each panelist to introduce him or herself. So welcome to the wonderful panelists, and would you start with Ms. Al-Anood? Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Rasha. It's lovely to be here with you today with this lovely panelist, and thanks to the Queen Rania Teachers Academy. My name is Anood Al Kaabi. I'm the head of programs at the Education Affairs Office at Conference Court, Abu Dhabi. I'm excited to have this conversation about a very specific program and a very specific experience we had with teachers.
Thank you very much. And now I would invite Dr. Christopher Koch to introduce himself, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Chris Cook, and I am the president of the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Mamdouh Fadiel, please go ahead.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be with you today. I'm Mamdouh Fadiel. I'm the Chief of Party for USAID Technical Assistance Program, working with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Youth, here in Jordan, based in Amman, and looking forward for a successful panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now, Professor Dr. Anood Bachelor, please.
Hello there. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to participate. My name is Norbert Pachler. I'm Professor of Education at the IUE, which is UCL's Faculty of Education and Society. We've just celebrated our 120th birthday the other day. I'm also Vice Provost Education at UCL. Those are the two roles that I inhabit.
Very pleased to have you all here with us today, and we are going to start our discussion about building teacher competencies for the future. And I have a number of questions in mind for our dear panelists so as to brainstorm the ideas. First of which, how do you find competencies, the new model of competency-based education, different from the intended learning outcomes model? And what are the core competencies that your institution targets for teachers pre-service or in-service teacher training? And how can these competencies really build teachers' capacity in facing the uncertain future and transform schools of today? What are like the foreseen outcomes? What are the impact indicators on education and so on? So I would invite each panelist to contribute to the conversation his or her own way. So if you have a PowerPoint to share or something, we would start by alphabetical order. Ms. Anood Al Kaabi, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rasha. I think this is something that we've been discussing for some time, especially post all of the events that recently happened. The teacher role has dramatically changed. We all know that. Yes, knowledge is very important, we agree, but there are more skills now and competencies that we and teachers need to acquire for the future in order to speak. And I think one of the most important things is that how can we speak with students the same language, and being aware of everything they're going through, being aware of social media, being aware of all of the technologies that are available, and how can we use all of the platforms, how can we choose the right platform for us for our own learning and development.
Thank you, Ms. Anood, for your contribution, and we would move on to Dr. Christopher, please.
Absolutely. And I want to recognize Queen Rania Teacher Academy for having achieved CAPE accreditation and having won our Frank Murray Award, which means that they went through accreditation without any areas for improvements or stipulations. And that's quite an achievement. The competencies that CAPE accreditation is designed around is student learning, which is at the center really of accreditation. We have 5 key competencies and standards that drive our work. The first is content and pedagogical knowledge. The second is clinical partnerships and practice. The third relates to candidate recruitment, progression, and support. The fourth standard is around program impact. And this is the area where student learning can be measured and looked at and described as evidence. And the final standard, which many consider to be the most important, is the establishment of a quality assurance system and continuous improvement for providers who are going through accreditation. We do encourage providers as they're going through accreditation and working towards these competencies to set up quality assurance systems that have meaning for them, because they'll be more likely to use them from a year-to-year basis to measure progress. I'll pause there and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christopher. And it's really good to know is that impact is measured, and that it's very important that impact would show on the learning of students. So, and that's the ultimate goal of any education system. Thank you for highlighting this very important part. And now we would move on to Dr. Mamdouh Fadiel. Please, Fadiel.
Yeah,
please.
Of course, thank you. While being encountered with uncertainty, challenges, and transforming educational conditions, new nuances about teaching competencies should be brought to discussion, mainly related to enhancing the teacher's societal status, a framework for licensing teachers professionally, frameworks for selecting and qualifying teachers before and during service, and to sustain their competencies to meet the requirements of future education. Professional competencies do not work without an ecosystem that guarantees their employment, starting with policies, systems, and institutional culture and organizational culture. There is a need to reflect the global competencies model that focus on appreciating others' point of view, being open to different experiences and cultures, contributing to research, and contemplating various global issues, knowledge production, and taking the initiative to achieve sustainable development. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mamdouh, and thank you for highlighting the context, because context with all that it bears with culture and factors that affect the performance of schools is something that we should really be considering. Thank you for highlighting this. And now to Professor Dr. Norbert, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. In relation to your first question, and I focus on the first and the second question you posed in my opening remarks. I think it's a very positive thing indeed for us to be encouraged to think in terms of specifying learning outcomes, because it can really help us drive the content and the assessment of our educational practices. The extent to which there is a difference between intended learning outcomes and competencies, I think it is valuable to think about behavioral and applied skills, which I would consider competencies to be, in addition to and as well as sort of more traditional academic skills and focal areas, and get a useful blend. I just think it's important that, you know, we have a good mix of both, and don't just reduce educational outcomes to that which is easily measurable, which I think is a slight danger inherent in competencies. In terms of the practices at my own institution, I'm afraid that's very much governed by the UK government and its stipulations. It sets out in a document that is called Core Content Framework, which is a number of areas that we are encouraged to look at. And we do, of course, do that. But I think and I'll name a few of those in a moment, but I think it's also important to recognize that the document does state that it doesn't contain an exclusive list, and that there is and should be scope for other dimensions as well. And I'll talk about one such dimension later on if I get the opportunity. But in terms of what's required of us, it's required of us to ensure that our student teachers have high expectations of their pupils, that they understand how pupils learn, that they have a good grasp of the subject knowledge and the curriculum, that they understand classroom practice, that they engaged in adaptive approaches to teaching, that they have a good grasp of assessment, are able to manage behavior, and are very clear of what professional behaviors are expected of them, and how they should be conducting themselves in schools and in society. So there is a clear set of expectations. It may be worth stating that the government also funds an organization that's called the Education Endowment Foundation, and they undertake research often based on very particular types of methods, clinical trials or equivalent of, and it's that sort of knowledge base that underpins the curriculum. But it's very clearly taxonomized. You can look it up on the internet and interrogate it there.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing up the behavioral, attitude component, which is really something that's very important and makes all the difference when it comes to actual practice in the field. And we would move on to the second question about, how do you think that the core competencies that your institution targets would really help teachers during pre-service or in-service training, and whether standards or competencies or frameworks are against creativity. So if there is a room for teacher creativity and contribution, or it's just a straitjacket that fits all, as we say. So back to Ms. Anood, could you tell us more about the experience, about the core competencies that your institution is really working on?
I can't talk from an actual experience of the moral education program. and how we implemented a full program called the National Capacity Building Program. It was an eye-opening. I was honored to be part of it. Just to go a few steps back to put things into context, in 2016, the UAE took the challenge to have a full-fledged program to instill character, global values such as respect, honesty, and so on to students. In order to do that with more than, with a country that have more than 200 nationalities, more than 20 different curriculums across the country, we had to create a national curriculum that fits these different programs. What we realized after more than 250 school visits, going to the field, speaking to parents, speaking to teachers, speaking to school principals, is that teachers' main comment was that we don't feel that much confident about teaching that subject. And we have to always remember that with the moral education, it's not about knowledge, it's more than that, because how you can easily speak about honesty, but what we want is we want the behavioral change, right? We want students to be honest. And this is where all of this was taking, this feedback was taking, and we built a national capacity building program. It was blended 80% online, 20% face-to-face. Teachers were able to be part of a learning community, and I think that's very, very important. They had their own mentor. It was self-paced, so very according to their own timeline. And with this experience, we came to know that that's all what teachers need, right? Like, you can give a lot of knowledge. There was a lot of discussion about skill strategies, how to innovate, create, go outside the classroom, how to engage the whole school. But the most important element of that was that everyone was engaged. Teachers supported each other. The assessment was that based on, they take their own videos based on their learnings, and they shared it with other teachers, and other teachers were able to comment and give feedback. And these teachers were able as well to take that feedback and I think this is one of the most successful ingredients for this specific program that was implemented.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this with us. It's very interesting to know about a program about moral education and this intensity of capacity development on how to really take it into action and to implement, one of the very difficult components of competencies, which is, behavior and attitudes. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. I would like to invite all the audience to write their questions. If you have any questions, write in the Q&A your questions, so as we can direct your question to the panelists who can really get back to you on this. Thank you. And now we would move on to Dr. Christopher, and please about the models that your institution is really having in place for competencies development.
Thank you. I should have mentioned at the onset that CAPE was formed with the merger of two prior accreditors, NCATE and TIAC. And in doing so, we tried to take the best of the competencies with the new CAPE accreditation process. And I think one of the beauties of having an outcome-based standards model is that we don't dictate how providers can meet that model. So we see multiple approaches to meeting the standards, different types of evidence, and it allows for innovation and creativity. And I think the other essential component that makes this work is that our governing board has all the folks who would be interested, all the stakeholders among our membership. So we have providers, we have faculty, we have deans, we have provosts, but we also have those who employ teachers. We have teachers themselves, members of the public, and specialized professional associations for content. And that leaves a well-rounded discussion around the competencies themselves and keeping them up to date and keeping the model alive. We also have our standing research committee to our board that includes folks who publish in teacher education. And that helps us ensure that the standards and the components are based on what is known about the field is to be working. For example, we have multiple, instead of having a standardized test approach to whether candidates are proficient, we look at multiple gateways throughout the process where they're transitioning from one to another, where evidence could be provided and where candidate needs can be addressed throughout the system. And we ask for several examples and deposits of evidence along the process so that we know there's a pattern informed. So we look for 3 cycles of data in the process. That doesn't mean 3 years, but it's at least a recurring collection and analysis of data by the provider so that it ensures they're on the right track and addressing candidate needs. That I think overall is why we don't see a standard approach to every accreditation or every provider who goes through it, but we see a lot of innovation and creativity in how standards can be addressed domestically and internationally. We also, in making approval of an accreditation determination, it is a determination of peers. So it is a peer review process with individuals where professional judgment comes into play, it can be applied appropriately. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You've highlighted a very important aspect, which is research in support of competencies and teacher development. So, and that is an excellent room for innovation and for the contribution of teachers in a scientific way, rather than, learning by trial and error. It has to be a solid research mechanism for highlighting creativity and innovative approaches from teachers' side. And I'm really grateful for that. And Dr. Mamdouh Fadiel, how do you, what are models and actual processes that you want to share with us from your own experience and institution?
Yes, allow me to share the current effort that is done jointly by the Jordanian Ministry of Education and USAID Technical Assistance Program towards updating and implementing the teacher policies based on the teacher charter and standard that were established in 2020. Currently, we're working together on supporting teacher policies by updating the general framework towards a professional licensing system for teachers and leaders in Jordan. Also, we are focusing on strengthening and updating the possible system to activate and implement the policies, including completing the teacher profession charter, which includes the professional development standards for administrators in the education system, review the regulations of accreditation of professional development programs, reviewing the current multilateral assessment and performance management system, reviewing the quality assurance system for professional development programs, and designing continuous professional development curriculum for teachers and other educators. In the meantime, we're looking at re-engineering the training management operations and automation of the educational supervision system. These are updates that would strengthen and create what I mentioned earlier, the ecosystem and the context that would support implementation of competencies. We're also focusing on building capacity of those who are in charge of applying those policies at the national level by updating training programs for each comprehensive professional development program and training colleagues at the Education Training Center to implement the policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mamdouh. It's really good to know about, the things that the government in Jordan is working on and the measures that are put to give a highlight on the teacher education system. Thank you very much. And Professor Dr. Norbert, could you share with us, please, in the UK, what are like the most recent developments into the field of teacher preparation and competencies development?
So as I said earlier on, we are seeing an increasing level of prescription from government as to what type of curricula and what content needs to be covered in teacher education. And as I noted, these contents tend to be based on evidence generated by the Education Endowment Foundation on the basis of certain types of research, in particular randomized control trials. It was also interesting to note from our previous speaker, Nuno Creator, the reference to learning sciences, and of course they are also becoming increasingly important in underpinning our knowledge base that helps us educate our future generation of teachers. But I just sort of like to urge a little bit of caution in really not being too hasty with adopting these new approaches, and stop and think about the potential limitations of some of sort of the methodologies themselves in terms of particularly question around replicability, as well as the theory practice divide, and how they can be bridged. And I'd certainly very much urge us to use a broad evidence base, including qualitative studies that really focus on the social dimension of learning, and trying to help us understand deeply what happens and what actions might be usefully derived from that. So effect size, I don't think, is everything, and we need to be quite holistic, I think, in our approaches. But the fact that subject knowledge and curricular knowledge are being very much promoted as important, I think is a very positive development, and it's really, I think, about enabling our new teachers to understand some difficulties that new teachers, student teachers might have in understanding the types of problems and my pupils might have in really understanding subject-related issues, and how best to teach them those particular challenges. So that would probably be my answer to that question.
Thank you very much, and it's really very interesting that you touch base with the issue of challenges and difficulties and problems that would face teachers. And if we take a bit of a zoom out, we find many teachers that are complaining is that they get an upgrade in competencies, but the school leaders are not on the same wavelength. So what would be your prescription on how to align teachers' competencies with school leaders' competencies in this regard, please?
You asking me?
Yes.
Yep. So I think one of the things I hoped to be able to do today is make a plea for the consideration of futures literacies as a important component for the teacher education endeavor. And I think that's an area that where the concerns of our organizational leaders and of our students converge, because I think they both, by and large, care very, very deeply about the challenges that our world faces, and are really, really keen to develop educational responses to those challenges. And I think inherent in futures literacies well done is, on the one hand, a recanonization of the curriculum towards a stronger competency orientation, of which, of course, the competencies around futures literacies might be included, as well as, of course, and very importantly, the promotion of agency on the part of students and on the part of leaders. So that's, to me, I think, would be a useful point of convergence where the entire learning community of a school can really come together, rally together, and work towards a better future for us all by developing useful and new and interesting pedagogical actions that helps pupils to feel better prepared for facing the challenges of an uncertain world. And I think we've probably not done quite enough in teacher education to face up to these particular challenges.
Yeah, thank you very much for the excellent answer. And I would direct the same question to Dr. Christopher Koch about the CAPE school leaders standards and competencies, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Dr. Pashler, for your comments. We do have a separate level of competencies for school leaders and school principals and administrators. We call them and refer to them as our advanced competencies. And we do initial and advanced accreditation reviews simultaneously. We know, in fact, that many school personnel sometimes leave teaching because of lack of administrative support or knowledge. Our advanced level standards also take into consideration other school professionals, such as school counselors. While there's a separate accreditor also for counseling, it is something that we recognize as important and include within our advanced accreditation reviews. Another thing I just wanted to mention, we do also, I think, in reference to Dr. Pashler's comments, we take both qualitative and quantitative evidence is acceptable as part of an accreditation review. We don't believe that the answers lie in just quantitative measures, but also we see a lot of providers going through accreditation, for example, using case study methodology or other means to provide evidence about how candidates are doing and progressing throughout their program. I will pause there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the contribution to the question. And we would move on to the last question. The last formal question in the panel, but we have many questions from the audience. How can these competencies build teachers' capacity in facing the uncertain future and transform schools of today? Dr. Anood, please go ahead. Mr. Anood, please go ahead about the future, facing the uncertain future.
Sorry, Dr. Rasha, I missed some of the conversation, so I wasn't sure if I was the person having the question. So can you repeat, please, the question again?
The question is, how can these competencies build teacher capacity in facing the uncertain future and transform schools for today? Because, I mean, we're now in a state where really future is uncertain.
Yeah, and I think there is the word that I would relate to uncertainty is fear, right? It's fear of the unknown. And when you have, and I think one of the main things that we all have this in common is that how can I stay relevant to what's going on, right? How can I stay relevant? How can I stay important to my career, to my daily job? And in order to do that, we need to keep up with all of these competencies. And I would emphasize the lifelong learning, because this is where it never stops, right? Like things change, and it's so fast. Things change so fast currently. And whenever we are more up to date, more aware, this is where we feel more comfortable facing the uncertainties.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Lifelong learning skills is one of the most, important fields for teachers to face the future and to be able to adapt and change and look for the better for themselves and for the students. Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Mamdouh Fadiel, please.
Thank you. Allow me to bring to this discussion and this question what we learn from educational research and also social science research. So according to anthropology of education, research today, today's transversal educational circumstances constrain the sorts of subjects that learners can become, and at the same time constitute them as young and educated in the Middle Eastern and Arab context. Researchers argue that a new generation of Arab youth have been brought into the post-independence dream, where universal education is the dream of upward social mobility, and yet their hopes has not been fulfilled. Education, to a large extent, unfortunately, has failed to act as an agent of social mobility by the failure to meet its promise to provide employment and to provide a dynamic labor market following the new liberal reforms, economic reforms. Actually, researchers argue that students' negotiations of notions of success and self-realization reveal a number of ambivalences and sense of frustration through which students' subjects are constituted at the education and inside the school. Young people, negotiation of notions of self-realization of success carries fragments of Western notion of individuality, and at the same time, local culturally idealized trajectories of national, communal, and religious commitments. Young people, while negotiating their fears of failure and risks of exclusion, are connecting these fears with what they witness of the weakening of the schooling system and the decline of the state welfare system. Future competencies of teachers have to take into consideration youth needs for a more certain education model that build their confidence, that answer their question, and prepare them to find their way in their higher education and in the labor market. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mamdouh, and I totally agree with you. And we would move on with the same question to Dr. Norbert, please.
Thank you very much. I think one of the themes that I would like to come back to is in responding, to the fact that the future is uncertain, and it's the perpetual change that characterizes our daily lives and educational experiences that we need to prepare students for, to develop the relevant sort of sets of resilience to be able to cope with those. I do think we should be asking ourselves whether or not in the sphere of teacher education we make enough use of digital technologies and an understanding of the affordances of digital technologies and the sort of inherent strength in terms of supporting notions of participatory cultures. If you think about citizen science, for example, if you think about learning as meaning making through the multimodal multimodal perspectives and potential of technologies. So I think what we really need to be doing is thinking about, what I called recanonization of schools earlier on, and think about how we can empower our young people, our learners, to really and help break down the barriers we currently have around learning in educational settings and informal learnings. And I think technology offers us huge opportunities for bridging those gaps, because unless we really utilize the huge sort of levels of motivation, time, resource, and so forth that lie in the informal sphere, and bring in the naive native expertise that our learners develop in those contexts, and start to valorize those more officially in educational context, I don't think we will really be able to prepare our young people, with the sufficient levels of resilience that they'll need to cope with the perpetual uncertainty that characterizes modern life.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Bachelor. And now, Dr. Christopher, please.
Yeah, I think we help to build capacity for an uncertain future if we approach our work first with humility and a desire for learning. And, as an example, the pandemic, of course, brought a great learning loss, but we also saw a lot of innovation among our membership, particularly in meeting the competencies of clinical experiences. So there's a lot of learning that should occur and does occur. The other thing we've built into our standards is in our bylaws and governing bylaws for organization. They require us to review them in depth at least every 7 years. So there's an automatic expectation that the standards themselves, the underlying research that supported them, will be periodically revisited in the event that things have changed to the point that they need to be. Another way I think we help build capacity for an uncertain future is by bringing forth models of excellence as we do our work, and we see how others solve problems. So for example, the way we try to do that, one way, is by recognizing providers who go through, who do real well, as I mentioned with Queen Rania. We also, within our workbook, we include links so that as people are going through accreditation, we can update with examples of how others approached the problem and what they did to solve it. And that promotes then learning among our membership, and it helps others to think innovatively in how we do our work. There has to be, I think, some built-in feedback mechanism for us to continue to build capacity for an uncertain future. And I appreciate the question and the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Koch. And now I've been receiving questions from the audience. Your inspiring, contribution brought up many questions. The first of which is how to align local transformation with global directions, because work global or work local, or how to align both, and how this can affect our students and society. So it's the answer is open to whoever wants to contribute to the answer. Professor Bachelor?
I'm very happy to have a go. I think it's a really, really important point to make, that the transfer of education policy from one country to another, from one system to another, very often is hugely problematic, because it's really important to understand the contextual features which allow for the success or otherwise of certain initiatives. So it if it is a question of trying to leverage the huge wealth of experience internationally for a particular local context, I'm all in favor of it, but it needs to be really, really done in a context sensitive way. And I'm not sure that our current models are in the field of comparative education are maybe sufficiently fine-tuned in order, to support sort of automated transfer. So having said that, I personally think, it is absolutely vital not to just engage in what one might call, local navel gazing, but to look beyond one's current boundaries and really try and identify new opportunities, new sets of insights. So I think it's inherently a very positive thing, but it needs to be handled very, very carefully, because there are lots of pitfalls in really not understanding sufficiently the interdependencies that might lead to success of certain features of other systems.
Can I just add to that, Dr. Rasha?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Yes. Personally, I always have this visual image of a tree which has strong roots, yet the hands are open to the sky. We definitely need to learn from and be global and learn from all different experience. But it's very, very important to have our roots very, very strong, based on our own values, based on our own needs, based on our history, based on who we are. If we don't have that, we lose a lot of sense. And I speak this from experience. We have seen a lot of kids, for example, just a very simple example. We have seen a lot of kids, for example, now in some of the private schools that even in our Arab countries that don't speak Arabic, and they're losing the language, although they're learning so many things and they have so many competencies and so other, but the language is not there. If we don't have these strong roots, we are going to face different types of challenges. Yet we need to learn from different experience. We need to be very open to the whole globe and learn from the East and the West.
Yes, I like so much the analogy of the tree and having the strong roots to the ground and openness to the new things and innovation and so forth. I think we have time for a final question and a wrap up. What would be, are there like some indicators that would help us to observe school transformation? Is there like a prescription of a foreseen indicator, set of indicators that would help us identify and monitor school transformation? Dr. Christopher?
Yeah, I think one thing that we would see as an indicator of a school transformation, and for school, I've worked both in K-12 school and we of course accredit higher ed institutions, so I'll refer to a higher ed institution or school. It's the reflective use of reflective collection and use of evidence, so that you have some basis on which to make determinations. And I think, once that happens and it becomes routine, where a provider or a school is looking at evidence, then you have your system of quality assurance, and then from that improvement. So I think that's a good indicator of school transformation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And Dr. Mamdouh.
Yes, allow me to add, this is a discussion that can take a whole session, but I would say very simply, to see school leaders and teachers with the capacity and ability to deal flexibly with the problems they face every day in providing an education model. This type of decentralized improvement and development, where leaders at the school level are empowered to make changes, to decide how to implement the curriculum, to decide how to provide assistance to teachers who need support, to promote peers learning among teachers, where the school become a center of excellence and provide professional development opportunities that come from within the classroom practice, not a top-down, a top-bottom imposed professional development that doesn't take the context of the school and the classroom. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And Professor Butler, please.
I think for me, I'd be looking for the way in which schools views itself, and I would hope that a school would view itself as a learning organization at all levels to ensure that the transformation, as Dr. Koch mentioned early on, is perpetually informed by evidence-based decision-making, by systematic problem solving at all levels of the organization. And I think it's this sort of expression of perpetual curiosity and attempt to improve all aspects of organizational work that would be, to me, signify a successfully transformative organization.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Anood, a final word about the indicators that you foresee change, transformation at school?
That's a very, very, for me, a very challenging question. But I have nothing to add to the beautiful conversation and comments of everyone, other than that one of the things that with the current situation is that the whole well-being aspect, where you find teachers' well-being is very high, student well-being is very high, parents are very much engaged, and this is where you feel that there is an actual transformation in a school.
Yes, thank you very much. And well-being is really a hot topic now, especially after the corona and things like that. I would have a couple of more minutes, 1 minute to wrap up. The discussion and conversation has highlighted the importance of the attitudes and behavior component of competencies, and I personally usually call it the road not traveled. So I'm very happy to see a focus on this aspect. There is always a room for research, for innovation, for teacher capacity development. Lifelong learning competencies is a must and is always needed for facing the uncertain future, relying on both qualitative and quantitative measures and indicators for measuring impact on schools. Have a national support for teacher capacity development, the importance of learning organizations and professional learning communities in the process of teacher capacity development, and the highlight of well-being for the school community, teachers and students is really important. That brings us to the end of this session. I would like to thank very much the wonderful panelists who gave, a very valuable contribution to the discussion. Professor Dr. Norbert Bachelor, Dr. Christopher Koch, and Dr. Mamdouh Fadiel, and last but not least, the dear friend, Dr. Mrs. Anood Al Kaabi, and wish you all the best for the audience with the rest of the forum sessions and discussions. Thank you very much.